I would like to share with you today thoughts, experiences as a performer, as a teacher, about what is that makes a Chopin concerto for piano right. Of course, not from wrong, because there isn't one or the other. Is the personal signature of your phrasing, the direction of your line, the legato of your speech, the narrative meaning of the story, the sense of heroism or wounded hero, the harmonization under the melodic line that goes from aria to recitativo, the long phrase, the run-on sentence, the pulse, and then the orchestra. Of course, compared to Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Grieg, Rachmaninoff, a great romantic concerti of the era that saw the piano roar and soar into an instrument that is the orchestra itself, an army of one, compared to the orchestra, which then in the case in Chopin is more like a Klangteppich, as the Germans say, the resonant carpet. And now it's relatively considered a little belittling, obviously, I think it's meant. But because it's really a sonata for piano. So in ways, Chopin in the form of the sonata makes a concerto, of course, to display the virtuosity of the pianist. What else? He's very young and was never got old. Poor guy. Or was he old very young? That's a good one. In any case, we don't know to our standards to compare with us endless studies and then endless career development and then specializations and advanced. No, we need to remain exactly like they were, meaning driven and not so experienced, but really full of enthusiasm, full of heroic feeling that the piano translates the feeling of spontaneity, of drive, of passion. It's not just cliche words, it's really the expression of humanity. What drives us? What brings us to go somewhere, to somebody, for something, for somewhere, for an ideal, for a purpose? Not just to play clean, typewritten, according to the most Urtextian editions, which anyway keep coming one after the other to say that they're more Urtextian than the other or the preceding. Ultimately, it's a vain pursuit under the, what I like to say for my students when I try to put them at ease, the dictatorship of the wrong note, which defines competitions. And then the other definition is the right edition. And since Chopin didn't care about the details, he copied 3 times each piece, sent it to 3 editions or publishers in England, France, and Germany. And in the making by himself or his students, friends, there were discrepancies which didn't really bother him as much as they bother today's scholars, musicologists. Oh, not to say that we don't care about the detail, because obviously that's where the devil is, as the story says, but it's also because the music is more than a sum of details, more than an obstacles course that you have to pass clean and clear like you do in sports. It's also the way you, the allure, the meaning, the elegance, the delay, the breathing, not that is necessary for the instrument, because it's not actually. The imitative singing of voice of bel canto opera with embellishments, with delays, with longings for the dominance, not dominance, the dominance, the delayed expectations by cadence that doesn't go to the tonic but to the sixth degree. And that delayed cadence, it's in English, it's called mostly used as deceptive. I don't think it's about deception. Of course, that is semantics. It's about delay tactics because you're long. You start a phrase. Of course, there is a little bit of a dialogue in the opening of the first movement where the cello interacts a little bit of thematic dialogue, but the rest just accompanies the harmonization. And of course, the piano does those bundles of unmeasured free-flowing phrases that the conductor is supposed to find on the downbeat, even if he or she has to wait for that to happen. It's exactly what you do with vocalizes in bel canto. But not just the vain beauty of demonstrating vocal prowess, or here would be finger prowess. It's also to show in the design of the drawing, appoggiatura, diminished augmented second of the harmonic minor. These beautiful drawings, these little decorative bundles, which in fact in Chopin, I believe, are thematic and in fact very melodic. Instead of going to decorate this dropping chromatically. That was the great word of supposedly Berlioz saying on the grave of Chopin in 1849 eulogy. Chopin, you kept dying all your life long with the chromatic descending scales, which of course are very signature of the Chopinians, if I may say so, expression of dramatic decay or nostalgic drop, even if it's very tender, like in A minor mazurka. And of course here he chooses not to do chromaticism, basically E minor scale with a little bit of bundles. That unmeasurement of the connection between and is really something that we have the biggest trouble understanding exactly how much we should take time at. If we try to measure it, it's strictly boring, meaningless. Just count it. If we're totally daydreaming loose, what do I do when I teach? I suggest. What do I do as a listener? I react. What do I do as a judge in a competition? I have to say no, yes, good taste, bad taste, too much, not enough, a rubato but is not meant, at least not notated, besides it's not notatable. And so what do? Do you swing the beat, you delay the beat, you rush the beat, you make up for the rubato, the famous rubato of the bel canto style, which for Chopin would be more like complete what, let's say, you lost in the tempo, you reach by rushing at the end to make up for the structure? Or is it just free flow, zigzagging, tipsy playing? Tell you the truth, through the times, and we have recordings to prove it, the sense, the taste, the meaning, the necessity of that rubato, or whatever we want to call it, perhaps even it's not that, but some kind of flexibility of the pulse in order to express the, the narrative storytelling through these bundles of notes evolves. Take, for instance, string instruments, slow movement of the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. The violin usually, in other recordings, of course, it's unglissandable on the, that's a word, on the piano. But of course, in nowadays, you hear almost no violinists take long time to slide expressively to reach that appoggiatura. But if you listen to recordings, even or violinists before the World War II, you hear it delectably taking the time to rise there. And so I guess it's a question of time frame. If Chopin was playing, who knows how, we only have some evocation between former students writing or reviewers explaining his left hand was weak, his right hand was not strong, but at the same time he will say that my right hand should ignore what my left hand does. All these things to suggest that the two hands are not supposed to really totally fit, which is like what you hear in Cortot expression. And if we take it at the word, then it becomes also a trick of exaggeration. You would do. And if it's often that you delay the note in order to have the right hand play the melodic note after the bass note, yes, you give the sense of purpose, highlight, mean, express, say, incorporate it in the melodic line with the bulge that it has, basically like a prose speech of expression. Therefore, a sense of spontaneity, even if it's calculated. Hopefully not too much calculated. But if every of these effects are systematic and often happening every downbeat, then you get to expect it. Therefore, it becomes no more expressively contributive. It becomes something that you only notice and you forget to listen to the beauty of the line. In other words, it's not just sounds, it's not just notes, it's not just pitches, it's not just rhythms or patterns. It's really a speech. So you can listen to a foreign language, you don't understand the meaning, you listen to the sound of the words, but when you know the meaning, all of a sudden you listen less to the sound of the music of the words themselves, but to the meaning or the usage of the words for the purpose that the poet or the writer uses specifically to choose one word more than another for an expression that will mean something either more cynical or more dramatic or more effective. And then you start thinking, what a great writer to just say it right. This nuanced expression. Oh, wish the composer was alive to ask what exactly the innuendos were. Oh, we can guess. We think we guess. Some of us think better than others knowing. I remain very, and will always be, careful with that knowing. I just think that there is a quality of improvisational effect which today is lost to most classical pianists because we have to follow the recitation of the scores. But in the old days, if you take the theme, well, the old days, the 1800s, very old days, it was expected for a pianist to improvise. It wasn't considered miscellaneous or unserious or unorganized or unfaithful. That's the basic thing to the score or to the music meaning of the words. It was almost as if Busoni and any other of the great artists would sign their concerto, bit like the great painters like Da Vinci or the others who were teaching in the Renaissance. When they had an artist, painter, student who did a beautiful painting, they signed it to approve it. So I would say that there is a little bit of that in the tradition of the paraphrase that Liszt and many did then. So you could take the theme and I would go I combine elements of the melodic line, which is very obvious. Ta-dam, pa-ta, everybody can guess that. It's obsessive. But the harmonization, the modulations, the chromaticisms, the decorations, all these toolbox tools from this time period of Chopin. And not only his, obviously he also borrowed from others. What does it do that? Is it just a logoria? Just like I don't have to play the notes, I just can make them up as long as I steer the pot and I stay in the time period style? Huh. I think that it's liberating to practice, but not necessarily needed to perform. I think in a way it liberates you when you perform the exact notes of the composer. It's an interesting way to go into the text from your text to reach a certain sense of what you yearn for, the truth. And you ask the teacher, the recording engineer, or the masterclass teacher, perhaps a judge of a competition, what should I do? Should I do more? Should I do less? Famous questions. So the nuanced amounts are very much to be decided by the taste of the composer's rhythm and notation, but also by the narrative quality of the story. So I would give you an example. If I want to improvise a first movement theme section that has a lot of that singing quality, I would like to play a legato inside the keys, deep inside, where the connection is overlapping without the pedal so much. And when I have a repeated note, the anticipation to the appoggiatura, to the leaning on the real note, which creates the dissonance only toward the harmony of the bass. These effects, there are repeated notes in singing are meaningful because you change syllables. I want to tell you how much I love you. And you don't hear them repeated unless you hear just the notes without the meaning. Ta ta ta. And I think the imitation of the voice through the piano, I know it's a problem with pianists, I think I am part of them, in the denial that the instrument is a singing instrument when it's a percussive instrument, and we only sing with a few vibrations until the decay of the hit resonance of a string. And the repeated note becomes an obsession for pianists, for the very articulation, for the action, repetitivity. Through repeated notes, and if we do with trills, so we have a single time to play it. We cannot reinforce it, we cannot repeat it, but if it's repeated, it's in an anticipation to the appoggiatura. Is that Chopin knew to imitate the voice to the point to which on the piano you have to also imitate the change of syllable in the repeated note and give it a meaning, not just a repeated note, mi, di. Of course not typed like that, but even. First and foremost, repeat it, lifting it halfway up the key, and repeat it quickly but deeply and softly. And if some of them need to be more expressively demonstrating the appoggiatura after the anticipation in the repeated note, but not all. So you start speaking, colorizing your touch in order to say syllables of imaginary speech. Of course, the dynamic range, the harmonic coating, the mode colorization being in minor, directs already the speech towards something dramatic and melancholic. Clearly it's not fun speech that is said through these notes in this aria, in this recitativo, or part recitativo, part aria, parlando, or canto, singing. Then you added the dotted rhythm, and then the repeated notes. And all of a sudden, your music playing becomes a speech of its own syllables through the articulation. And you don't have to worry as a student, what if the piano is not responsive to do? And I have to do? Or with the pedal? You hear ta ta ta, ta ha ta, but you don't hear ta ha ta. And it's worth spending time in one's life to find the expression of the subtlety after all, without to always mention to the teacher, as students tell me, what if my piano the day I will play, since it's always a different instrument, doesn't respond in the action to this subtle innuendo of halfway up the keys that is so beautiful in the expression, and rather do the factual, because it's more sure it will repeat. What if it doesn't repeat? Then it's a whole. If it's a whole, it's a wrong. If it's wrong, I am lost. In other words, again, we reach the point of the problematic factor of the fear of the wrong note, fear of the whole of the note. In other words, the dictatorship of the wrong versus the right. As if that is what makes it all happen right. And there is no wrong or right. There is an innuendo of emotional direction, and then you start thinking, what am I saying? So why is there a dotted rhythm here and not here? So Chopin chose to do, who knows if with the rubato he didn't play, slightly disconnected from the left hand for expression device, or just strict. Let's admit he did, and he notated it with a dotted rhythm, for that sense of dotted rhythm representing a sense of probably heroism, and then this a sense of affection, of tenderness, then written out mordent with 8th note to 16th a note, which have been more Baroque notation, and God forbids he doesn't shy of notating in other pieces these mordents, which are de facto 18th century music, not 19th century as his, but he's very much an 18th century, 19th century composer. So you can say that is a spread mordent, but melodized, no more just decorative or just they're obviously embellished. So each of these effects have a dosage to find. The legato, the crescendo, or the diminuendo, or the hairpin. And then you have another problem which you have to solve, which is the fact of not only hearing but also projecting. It's like inner ear, outer ear, what you control, what you monitor, what you decide, what you vision. And what is the vision is, how do I not decay a long note coming out of which come out series of short notes without an accent because of the decay. So I have to follow So what did I do? Because this high C or Do in the high register anyway doesn't have a very long range of vibrating resonance. And we don't do that on the piano, obviously. And so we accept, we define that we do play an instrument that decays on a long value in a short resonating thinner sound top register. But we didn't finish the phrase. It's not like little islands of notes and then you just put together some bridge. It's really an expression of a turn and then escaped and then a descent with patterns of neighboring tones, and the sense of singing comes in the step motion but also in the leap for the dramatic effect. In the is harmonized with a diminished seventh after all. It has the two tritones, so it creates a sense of tension that is unbelievably important, even if the high note doesn't sustain it, like a singer would do with a vibrato. I knew I would never sing when I taught, but I do all the time, even if I promised to myself as a child I won't do it because it's so silly, because my teachers always did. But anyway, for the demonstration purpose, I had no shyness. Shame, I'm sorry. So what do you do then? You have to play not too soft, the arrival, and then pick that F sharp at the level where the C has dropped, and then rise to the A to obtain an illusion with the left hand sustaining, and the bass line, again the left hand is two hands, one bass note, one harmonization, and this, the single aria singer. Of course, if you don't do that in the melodic line, you do. And that's most people do, because they consider that the fact that they play the do, even if the do or the C decays, they need to continue the emotional energy for the drive up. This is it's an intention. It's an expression of build-up energy. So you could ignore that the piano decays. You could ignore that you play an instrument that is not even Chopin's instrument. After all, our iron cast and our steel strings and our felt hammers, and basically the build of the piano is made to go and project for 2,000 people without microphone of resonance. Is just obviously, how do you do that to also play intimately? Do you use his pedaling or your pedaling according to your instrument? Do you privilege the harmonization in the pedal? Or do you have a melodic pedalization? Pedal, these quick notes coming down to the middle range, becoming more thick, more juicy sound, more core to the sound, and this like resonant bells. It changes the character of the lightness, of the vain beauty, and then here of the meaningful sentence. Soprano and alto in voice, so it already the range, the character, the operatic translation of the effects are not just toolboxes here. It's really sound drawing. In all honesty, we don't hear those elements of dropping and rising. We hear the music as a continuum: do, la, si, do, fa, sol, la, la, re, fa, do, si, la, la, sol, mi, mi, re, do, si, la, si, mi, mi, re, do, si, fa, mi, re, do, mi, do, si, la, mi, fa, re, do, si, do, si, la, sol, la, do, si, la, sol, la, sol. And we hear it vibrating in us, even if we are decaying in our air, breath, and we play, sing with the decay, or therefore with the exhaling, but then we sustain it because we have some air to ti-da-dum-ta-ti, and that on the piano has to be translated from the voice that is supposed to imitate. I know that the world of classical music is overfilled with professional teachers, performers, recording engineers, recording artists, scholars, article writers, book writers, defining the style, the expression, the pianism of Chopin, the pedal of Chopin, the length of sound Chopin, the legato of Chopin, the rubato of Chopin. and they give us those gospels of their opinions, which is always a problem when you reach that subjectivity and you transform it into objectivity to influence through editions or through publications the way of people thinking about what is the right or the wrong in a given generation. That less, perhaps more than before today, we have active access to so many different ways of playing the Chopin rubato because of the fact that now we have available recordings from almost 80, 90 years to here, and we can compare if we are seeking some kind of reassurance or quest for what is right, if we feel it not right. But at the bottom of the question lies the fact, what does it mean to me when I play it? Do I just play it to please an edition, to please a teacher, to please a time period, to please a conductor, or to please, I don't know whom, in fact, some kind of a aura of the famous pianists of the day, and we want to imitate them. And Horowitz did this, and Rubinstein did that, and Trifonov does this, and everybody does something, which is the visible aspect of the iceberg of their musical thoughts or their practicing or how they came to that. So they don't teach it because perhaps it's not necessarily teachable. What do you teach? A trade. So how to play the notes, how to finger right, how to not miss, how to be more reliable, how to reach the bases without to miss them. In other words, you teach the trade how to play it correctly in terms of the notes and the values that are on the score. Put some dynamic markings and indications within good taste, in other words, not too much. And then if you are not really musically driven and you play it not because it means to you for your life to find what I would like to express there, why do I feel it like the edition doesn't say, or I should not think of it like that, I should think it because that's the right way. But you might want to fight that inside yourself, even if it's gonna be a defeat at the end, to say, but I played because to me this is that, and I cannot just fit it in the beats. And ultimately, what makes the difference between the learned, the recited, the right, the reliable, every time you play through? That's also technically part of the skills I teach. Of course, all teachers teach. But what you really don't teach or can't teach unless you spoon feed, and then it's probably not very natural. I say that because I know it's not. But just to be polite, probably, is that innuendo between the notes. Sometimes he writes something desperate musically, and then you realize that it could become ironic if overstated, or affectedly soft if not driven enough. So where is the right cursor between the heroism or the wounded hero, the excitement or the development of a direction of a line? In other words, how much when we practice we repeat, therefore we rethink? Do we organize so that our phrase, our speech, our expression corresponds to something spontaneous, even if measured, calculated, but without to appear so? And very often in the beginning the piece is new, it's exciting, you as a student you devour it literally because you love it so much and you heard it so much and you wish to play it so much, and all this is so much, everything is much in every aspect. And I like that because in a way a teacher likes to work with a student who is driven, who has a meaning, who searches for subtlety or expression of energy, all of that on the above, the legato, the singing, the rhythm, the articulation, the lightness, the pedal, the left pedal or not, but which range, because of the low range and the top range differently affected by the una corda, or the singing inside the chords. Almost if you feel the chords, the strings in French. So then you shape, you sculpt, you sculpt the keyboard in an imaginary length of sound that you modulate with your taste about harmonization and melody. You cannot separate the two. You cannot just say it's a melody and then accompaniment, because even if the accompaniment seems to be acid and the melody completely all over the place. Okay, yes, there is a contrast, plus the orchestra sustaining that famous German word about the resonant carpet. You still have to find a certain way where the two hands meet at some point. They cannot constantly avoid each other, even if they are different characters of a theatrical storytelling, operatic, or whatever you want to call it, something extroverted, something where the element of expression is in the demonstration of your inner feelings exposed. That's exactly what opera is. And so the pathos and the the persuasion and the drama and the imitation of, let's say, weep, tears, or scream, or this this kind of leap and scream on the high note, and then slow nose dropping. Initial demonstration after the orchestra tutti symphony, presenting basically like overture of an opera, the themes and the mood, the piano has this long voice singing first theme development in the exposition already, and then you have the second theme. And note that the great composers intuitively, like Mendelssohn and Chopin, who were very young when they wrote these, like the octet by Mendelssohn when he was 16, Chopin was 17 or 18 when he wrote this concerto. They don't worry so much about the bridges. They don't worry about the formal connection of things. They just let it sort of like display itself, because they go directly to the strongly appealing melodic signatures of their thematic materials. I mean, come on, after this dramatic chromaticism in minor, this sense of heroism and affective and perhaps even wounded heroism, descending chromaticisms and all, then you have a second theme in the major version of the E minor, in E major. That E comes after a long D sharp, which you thought was the end of the sentence, but it's not. Just the harmonization of a major third degree to gain delay tactics, to return to one for tonic and go back. So yes, the harmonization analytically tells you something. So will you do? Incredibly unmusical drop of the melodic line when you think it's the rest, perhaps a semi-comma in writing, when you write the different phrase, sentence lengths, in the punctuation of music. Of course, then ideally you should have a regrowth of the D sharp. But so you have to choose. Either you diminish the D sharp, and then you have to. I don't want to do that, because it sounds like, where does it come from? This modulation by third with common tones. Well, it's not a modulation, but it's a secondary ornament, dominant. But anyway, whatever it is, I don't like too much to overanalyze for the melodic line, even if the harmonic coating is the one that critically gives that sense of colorization with this major G sharp triad, and then back to E major without to modulate, or or if you don't modulate without to reestablish the dominant. So he lets it linger long. That's exactly what is the expression of the Romantic era. You put in a pigeon's leg a little hope that does she love me not, and you wait for the pigeon to return, and it doesn't matter what of course it does what the answer is, but in the process you get love poems, you get theater plays, you get operatic dramas involving is in the longing. That's what Schumann does all the time in the music also. You wait for that tonic, you hope for that tonic, you wish for that tonic, and you get the leading tone, and perhaps you go to the relative minor or perhaps deceptive cadence. And that is such a symbolism for life. You hope, but you get disappointed, or you get betrayed, or you get cheated, or you hope for your feelings to be earnestly returned and they're not, and you don't know, and then you get bitter, and then you become all this. I don't know if there is a possibility to exactly match the different innuendos that the psychology of the human personality of the human being, the yearnings, the hopes, and the wishes, the impatiences, and the passions, and the single thoughts that cannot leave you, either because a perfume of an unforgettable sense of smell, or you saw beauty and you cannot frame it, but you wish to understand why you're so driven by it, and so you enter in this emotional state in which you write ballads or whatever. In other words, it's in that longing that most of the piece is happening, because in the harmonization you have a hope and then realization that you're back in the same note. In the first ballad, the question unanswered, because you always end on the dominant, and when you try to escape to relative major, and then you return to the half diminished second degree to go back to the minor, which represents the decay compared to the hope, to the major. Don't go as high, because he just gives you the hope and then disappointment. Yes, but no, and you have exactly that. Truth be told, in the second theme's exposition of the first movement, you have a secondary instrument that's supposed to do the dialogue, like in the opera. If you have the main actor's character, soprano, usually there is a mezzo or alto who is the one who's supporting role and who sings with her. And in this case, he organizes in the exposition it to be the French horn. When he exposes that in the recapitulation, in G major, is the bassoon. So much? Is it a secondary real voice, or is it just a supporting role, just in the background, not to be all the accompaniment, but to have a little bit of a second? I don't know. I think it's almost like as if you over-intellectualize it afterwards, because it's all about the singing of the soprano after all, and not else. The happiness finally found after the decay of the sadness of the chromatic minor, which shouldn't be only minor, but anyway, chromaticism should be also in tones anywhere. Neutral in Chopin is Mozart also. Most of the composers use it for romantic, dramatic minor mode, for the expression of the minor mode, rather. Already Bach with the chromatic fantasies in D minor. Parenthesis in the expression of the long sentence in the recap, where he's in diminished seventh minor before to go back to G major, the radiant soaring in the sky. And in this little moment of orchestration, pizzicati. Okay, it's not as subtle as other orchestrations because it's so obvious in the sense of dramatic effects, but it's beautiful too. It's just that it's not a real dialogue with orchestral interruptions where you have the piano and the orchestra broken into a section where the texture is shared and sometimes fought for, like in Tchaikovsky. It's interrupted by the chorus. And this you don't have in the Chopin concerto, these kind of dramatic interruptions, interactions. You have just and you hear a supportive pizzicato. Okay, it's different colorization if it were strings with arco. And then when you return to major, mind you, still the same line melodically, storytelling, narrative meaning. You're back to strings with arco. And then he starts this little extension through a dramatization of the speech with faster words and then effects of interruption with modulation in minor modes, like E minor. That is no more an aria. This is really an appoggiatura, a recitativo with full appoggiaturas. So you had it melodically in G major and immediately we produced a step in E minor. So if you overcolorize it in your playing, then you espouse the expression of the dynamic usage of the major and minor by this simple sequence produced by the composer. Should you not, or should you? If you want to be a little bit more of a forward seeing the direction of the line, arrival point, horizon line direction, you can be more expressive and stay in the same color. Rather the harmonization and the major minor do their effect. And if you think if you do the forte piano or mezzo forte mezzo piano, some kind of chiaroscuro of shadow light, yes, you can obtain that, and then you follow the drawing of his storytelling. So you can, some theater teachers would say, don't overstate. It's like, I am so angry and I am defeated. But you could say, I'm so angry while I am defeated. There's no words that you can put directly to follow for the melodic line as if you're doing an aria with the text. So it's all about imaginary. How can I teach? Thank God I have from time to time students who are so beautifully driven by their own inspiration. They respond to the music with their expression. You don't have to spoon feed them. This is major, this is minor, this is a sequence, this is a delay, this is a deceptive cadence. And I say that purposely, provocatively, with a bad tone, as if I'm being a little bit completely ironic when I mention it, because I don't believe that all these ingredients justify the interpretation. I think the interpretation calls for the understanding of the ingredients, but it doesn't justify them through them. I think it's to do with I'm getting so driven when I speak about these things. Let me be more objective. He uses, at least for the toolbox, a trill, the famous suggested idea of the vibrato, which are the repeated notes on the piano sounds percussive, which it is. So how do you play this trill? More the G sharp before you reach the A, because it's a passing tone that is crescendo with vibrato. If you do equally, you hear the A before the A. If you not, you have to reinforce the G sharp compared to the F sharp. Should you start it slower and then rush it? Unexpected is flat 2, the Neapolitan F major. He comes back to E minor through the augmented German 6. Oh, I'm sorry, I speak like a pharmacist about expression and for emotion. Who cares if it's Neapolitan or German 6th? Really, honestly, it's all about us showing that we know. And so what? That doesn't make it right. And nothing against pharmacists. It's just that I'm thinking that sometimes too much understanding, knowledge can shut her down, especially if you're afraid to do wrong, because so many people compete at playing clean. And so if I suggest play free and inspiration driven and perhaps rubato and who knows, improvisation, I don't encourage it, knowing very well that is against the expectations and that's not right, then I wouldn't serve if I respect well the student, but I want to give them that inner feeling of freedom while they play the notes as written. I think that's where you can find that moment where you match the best of the two worlds. It means to me, I say it with his words and people think it's mine, instead of having to do mine on top of it because I'm not enough with his words. His words are marvelous. That's why we play it, after all. If not, we have to improvise something from scratch, and everybody can do something, will be more or less cheesy. Who's to divine? But the point is that here we teach to play, we practice to play, we record to play, we grow up with the piece as performers to play, even if you don't teach it, regardless in which moment of your life's passage you are. You deal with the same question, until where and how much, and not too early, and I want to reach this point and have to plan it better. So you put yourself this kind of buoys in the ocean, and then you try to make sure that you don't get over the expected limitations of the good taste or the published notes, and all this combined. And if you can inject inside the real notes of his writing some of your meaning for it through his notes, without to overboard them, and without to overexpress them either. If it's major, happier, minor, softer, right away, dynamically, you might just bypass sometimes that major, minor mood change and just go for the harmonic direction at the end of the sentence. If you don't do enough, you might appear to performers or judges or people who listen to you that you're not expressive enough, not feelings, because you don't describe the feelings enough. And to some others who know the piece, they might say you overdo it. So who decides the right amount? Who is the artistic director? Who is the... there is no objective theater director for how you display your character's expression. Of course, you have a conductor, that's judge of piece. Of course, he and she, or both, use the pulse and the beats. and the spread and the space between the tensions, the releases, the harmonizations, the slight delays, the bowings, the breathing of the wind instrument. So yes, you have a sense of tension with the diminished seventh, and then cadence, and arriving in relative major. And what is left for the pianist is the right hand speech quality of the legato. And so if you want to say, I'm going to play it only legato, the right hand. All legato. Sorry for that wrong note. Expression, some recitativo inside the aria, essentially injecting portions of this. It's not one or the other. Then you're more speaking than just singing, because in a way, singing is not as operatically the action, it's more the reflection. The action is in the recitativi, the singing is for the aria in the mood description of the character's state of mind at the given point of the storytelling. So it's suggestive of the mood, just like in films, the music of the film music suggests to you if something is going to happen that is scary, or you're well in some kind of a daydream mood. So the character of the actor doesn't have to show it in their faces. No more silent films. So in a way, we don't have to mime the music pianistically, so to say. We have to find which sections sing for the legato, which sections have to be more articulated for the parlato, the spoken. The Sprachgesang, as the Germans say, the spoken sung, when they, like Mozart's opera, the Magic Flute has, instead of recitativi, these spoken moments, Sprachgesang, and then Strauss does, and many for their operas. The point of the story is that you could do a little bit of that in the playing, and then you arrive to sing this, and you decide to sing and soar. Still singing. And all of a sudden change to recitativo. It's every articulation of syllable. I want to tell you something so meaningful to me. As if it is spoken like this. We go back to the singing. And then inside the recitativo. And that German 6 is the spreading of the dissonant augmented sixth, seventh, sounding like that gives the sense of spreading tension to the release. We reach here at the point of the thought process, of the experience, and of the wanting to teach and understand and play oneself, not only teach for others, the right speech level of expression, the emotional drive that is inside the suggested innuendo of the character's expression. To which extent to overstate it, to which extent not to hold it too much at bay and say, I'm not going to give too much, no, I'm not going to play too much, I don't want to play too much rubato, I don't want to play too expressive, not too early, people exaggerate, I don't want to exaggerate. That could be an attitude of saying, I have this statement to do in this, let's say, soundscape frame of my storytelling, and I choose that to be my guideline as an artist. I have the right to have that, regardless if I can, and you will most likely in the future, change mind about it and say, I shouldn't have done that so much. I did too much of this, not enough of that. The dosages sometimes are dictated by the intuition and sometimes are inspired by the understanding, and then are combined with the knowledge from the lessons or the imitative performances of other great artists. We try to, I like to do the development like such, or my teacher said this but I like it better that way. You have to filter all this until it becomes yours, until it's believable through you. It almost feels like as if, despite of the written text that is our only connection to the piece, the oral tradition, like they do in the folkloric music, when they transmit from generation to generation folk music, doesn't give the details, it gives you the feel, like in jazz, like in folk, like in world music. Then you just let yourself impregnate by that expression, and then you become the next person who carries the torch a bit further to pass it to the next generation. I feel like, in a way, even despite of the writing, which is objective, and the editions and all these scholars, the performer teacher one-to-one student teacher transmission, it's a bit of oral tradition. It's like the teacher said, I like it this way, and the teacher student goes, oh yeah, I like it too. And so you find ways to convince by the playing, by the emotion that it projects, not by the explanation, the analysis, or the details. In a way, you would say perhaps studying it defeats the purpose of the expression that in the first place drove you to play it, which is the emotion that is triggered spontaneously by that. And if you are taught too many details, too many explanations, too many analytical organizations of the thought processes of the composer for the structure of the phrase, the structure of the harmonization, the direction of the line, the not too early, not there, not now, a little later, and you sort of guide, or perhaps in a way, I feel very, as a teacher, big responsibility to be very careful how much I try to place my imprint of my way of understanding, hearing the aesthetics of the piece on the student. Sometimes you feel like the student is reluctant, or the student doesn't know and tries to get an answer and then build their own answer, or the student comes with an answer and it doesn't fit yours, and it's a little bit of a clash, and you have to accept it. Sometimes you have to let the teacher be the student who hears what it means to the student, because that's the beauty of it, is that every generation comes with a new way of playing, if not very different, but somehow so the same piece. And who's to say, just because of the fact of the age, that experience and studies brings me as a teacher to be contradicting the intuition of the student. I have to be very careful, and I am very careful, very, very careful, to guide the student to find themselves in the piece, where they believe and they're believable when they play it. And that is something that I find very precious. Of course, if they have a very strong intuition, it's easier, because you just channel the flow. And if they're a little bit more hesitant, because, let's say, the musical expression or the musical language of the composer, be it for Chopin, not so often, because it's the most popular among pianists, so they've heard many pieces by Chopin before they play their concerto, for instance. It's not like a rarely played composer's concerto and you feel like, what is that language? Does it remind me of this, or that? Bit of Schumann, bit of Chopin, a little bit of Mozart, a little bit of Beethoven, a little bit of Haydn. No, it's not about these ingredients. It's about how to enter in the music. And of course, when the introduction starts, in the piano entrance, what does he do in else than imitate the orchestra tutti? course. Chopin says, I am the orchestra in one, and I am not needing you. And then a technical section of dropping sixths in broken thirds, were voiced, or all soft, or just very expressively dropping every note as if it's spoken, or is it like in the Tempest, that the theme has the two characters, the vindicative and the pleading, and here you could have same way, the heroic that arises dominating, the dotted rhythm, militaristic, at least in the 19th century's poem. And this arpeggio going up, it's a gesture like almost with a sword of the 19th century. And then we have this. How soft is it, and how driven is it, and how articulated is it? And the third scherzo, you have which king is it? Like I don't think it's the right key. So much for that example. He does this kind of cascade droppings that are very expressive in the fact that they sound like harp or resonant like little bells. And here, it's the first entrance of the piano, the soloist, the mighty instrument, and then you have the re-exposition of the theme on the subdominant, second degree. Again, the high note, and then again the same. As if after this first two rising, like horse rising, oh, and then you have the singing, the aria. Extend the sentence unmeasurably, unmeasuredly. The scale, the arpeggio, the delay, the anticipation and suspension, the appoggiatura, the turn, and the return to E minor. And then the second sentence as if spoken to oneself. And then the scream out of that, the leap of the 10th. Balance with the left hand. The length of sound in the top and the overpowering octave in the low. Of course, the straight-string pianos in Chopin's time didn't have enough basses, so he had to octave it, and this is single. So you have the diminished 7th with the leap of the 10th. How far are we gone from the second partita's finale? Ah, that's provocative. Of course, it's not the same expression. Chromaticism, Neapolitan. I cannot help myself. So what defines your playing? The legato, yes. The delay, yes. The rubato, yes. The expression of the line's arrival point and not losing too much, but still allowing the free float when he has this unmeasured group of cadenza, when singers in the opera aria do the vocalise. Yes, all these are these ingredients. But the quest is for the right, the quest is for the truth, and the quest is for what it means to me that might not mean to somebody else the same way. And how can I be convincing within the rhythmic pulse structure of the score? After all, there are no noodle bars, they are strict bar lines, like every 3 beats you have a bar line. Obviously it's not prison bar lines, but in a way they are there for a purpose, of course, mostly for rehearsal purpose. Not for the phrasing group of bars. It's 8, 16, 12, 10. Regardless, it's until you have finished saying what you have to say in this run-on sentence, because you're so full of whatever you want to express. You want to express in the passion and the expression and the rising and the dropping and the wounded moment with the Neapolitan Six and the rising through the chromaticism and the sense of heroism and the sense of speaking to yourself as a whisper, and then the scream of the hope. And that all these effects of the theatrical effects, literally beyond even opera, to do with the pathos and the sense of conveying the purpose of why you say it. It's not just words that you recite, is meaningful sentences of your own human experience through the piece. It's exactly for an actor who plays Shakespeare or Molière or Cervantes. Yes, there is a language. Yes, there is a signature, if you want, of the tonal system, or you can call it whatever it is. But within that, you have to be yourself expressing it. And how do you find it? Does it take... I don't know how long it takes. Perhaps you never reach it. But of course, on the way, you get teachers, conductors, juries, and many people who somehow at some point tell you, don't go out of the design steps. Don't do there, don't go there, because if you go, you lose yourself. I still think that the quality of the touch, the singing meaning of the legato, it moves you when you hear it. And you, regardless if you think, oh, I don't want, this is too much, or I shouldn't be, or why does Argerich do this, why does this competitor do that, regardless of the lack of fame or over fame, we don't care. We shouldn't. We should go and think, wow, what a breath, what a meaning, what a sentence. Something has happened. Something has happened beyond playing right, which is not a prerequisite for all. It's the prerequisite for the, I would say, ground from which you rise your expression. And you should hold on it. You should believe in it. And sometimes people tell you, nah, it's too much, not enough. And okay, fine. But what does it mean to me? If I just apply everything I'm told, I sound like a composite. I sound like, I don't know, a little bit of everything. And I'm losing even the meaning of why am I doing it. So it's healthy to contradict. It's healthy to search. It's healthy to yearn for the best way I can say that sentence, especially when it's less dramatic in the second theme. Who would have said that the second theme will be a series of scales? So you can say, oh, it's so simple, it's so beautiful, oh, it's so banal. Well, it is both. But when it's Chopin, the banal becomes meaningful. If he had done he does some kind of embellishments, but the first time he exposes it, so to say, straight, naked, meaningful, just like the soul, not naked body. I speak of the spirit of our integrity of humans. Who are we? What do we express? That's where you're saved by your legato. That's why I don't denigrate the idea of the importance of teaching the technique, because there is no artistry without technique. Only intentions that cannot be expressed. But when you can zero on what the expression should be, and you find the right tool to, like a dart that reaches its point of the heart of the target, then it's not too much, it's not under, it's just right. The legato, the crescendo, the acceptance of the rising scale that doesn't need a crescendo, nor the descending needing a diminuendo. By itself it rises, by itself it drops. But if you think you can put more makeup just to meaning, even if the face is beautiful without, then you have to add. And if the high note is so meaningful, you delay with the bass note. And then you say, to yourself, it's too much now. I want to be simple but expressive, meaningful but not overstated. To some I will appear cold and distant, to some I will appear over-involved, overplayed, overstated. So this constant oscillation between too much and not enough, and not now and later, and why and when, when and why, major, minor, major, chromatic or not, pedal or not, harmonic or melodic, delayed or anticipated, more free, and then organized in a structure of group of bars that you find still yourself back in the pillars of the beat. If you rushed second and third beat, you stretch it before the first. So in other words, intuitive or thoughtful denigration of the written text, but in a way it becomes like that oral expression tradition, that you say it as if it was told to you. Through the score comes alive as if an elder sang it to you, and you play it just because you heard the elder sing it to you, like they used to do in the oral tradition, in the oral transmission of music, not the written one, which in a way locks in the pitches and the values rhythmically, but doesn't really define, of course, indications for ritenuto accelerando, but it's mechanical. It's not inside between the notes. If it says, this will be so beautiful, or this is so much wish, or I would like to dream, or I would like to hope, it's not the same according to what you say or you are saying in the storytelling, when the music is the accompaniment to the words, like in art songs or operas. And they have their melodic and harmonic action, suggestive or overlapping the importance of the word that they're saying. But here we don't have a specific word, so we don't know what that says. And that's the beauty of it, that we don't want to know. Everybody imagines what these rising notes mean to them. Even if they don't have to explain it and express it and write articles about it, just play it. To spread that note and this group of notes and this flow of notes. And search it until your inner heart tells you what is right, even if you might be wrong overall and later change mind. Why am I writing? Why am I playing this piece? Is to tell it with my words through his. not instead of his, as I said earlier when I improvised, but just through his words. I don't know what to say other than I said too many things. I wanted to share with you so many of my inner world questions, perhaps most of them unanswered, like the philosopher question rising to another question. And ultimately, yes, I know how I love it. Yes, I know that I don't want to clone it on the student's way of loving it, because in a way it's not respecting the student. If I feel like, okay, this is getting too much far away from the mainstream of expectation of the character of the piece, then I would. But I try to be directive in listening and respecting. By respecting, I want to also express what I think is the innuendo in this piece. But then I have to hear their innuendo, and then I don't want to overimpose. Of course, then the fingering comes in, and the pedaling comes in, and all these details come in that define some kind of somehow what you want to do out of this sub-phrasing or long phrase or spoken phrase or sung phrase. Ultimately, what do they do when they practice, the students? They just play through many times, to the point to which perhaps they lose the connection to the piece, the meaning to it, the initial attraction to it. It becomes only more about managing the technique in order to play it clean, which it's a very strange thing. I encourage to find the best way to finger in order to have the most reliable performance, therefore to be clean, is an incentive to liberate your musicianship, to liberate your juices, to liberate your meaning, what you want to say, not to stifle and be cautious. To be not cautious, you don't want to be taking useless risk, because then you're going to hit the wrong note and immediately the sentence will flow on the floor and you say, wrong. But you can do it with holding the fingers for the lips. So okay, now you know you play all the right notes, but then you have this suggested high notes of the two hands, the fifth in the right hand, thumb in the left hand, because of the disposition. But there is no indication in the score with, let's say, stems that hold and you will become. So if you play what is written, you should do. If you prolong these high notes, this lit high beam notes. Is not an aria, it's not a recitativo, it's a bridge, and it's more about motion rather than emotion. But can you inject a little bit of it within that? Objective in the subject, subjective in the objectivity? I think. The difficult point is because his chromatic scales should be decorative, but they become part of the melodic expression. They become part of the expression of the meaning of words, not just the decorative embellishment. Because these little drawings, the patterns that all of a sudden slow down the drop. So if you think about it, it could be almost spoken sung legato inside the keys. Or then just fingers. Like the little dots, arrows of light, some kind of. Because in the high register, it's like little bells. Or then sing it. I would like to ask him, so Frédéric, what did you want? Decorative? Song? Expressive, meaningful, or just fingers motion and then let the things happen? He introduces trills and chords with beautiful harmonization that is very rich, intense, and released at the same time, and then this kind of gesture of the flying bird in the air. Because all this was a bridge to the second theme in the recap. And in the beginning of the development, it's first theme in C major. And the bassoon. Again, these little droppings of stardust. Or is it just a scale with occasional thirds? It's just so charming, it's so touching, it's so affectionate. If it was all thirds, it sounds like an etude. If it's only the scale, it's sort of like empty or weak, and then to have the scale with the little light, bright, shining dots on the top is just unbelievable discovery of his, to write a simple scale with such charming and meaningful combined elements of decoration as well as of meaningful descent of the scale. So the decorative aspect becomes meaningful. You can take to slow down unmeasuredly those decorations in the right hand depends on the breath of the bassoonist. In this case, it's not more a sonata anymore, it's really a concerto, even if the piano has all the elements. But this secondary theme, or secondary voice rather, the conductor will show you with the beat that you cannot overstay in this kind of lingering dropping of this decorative, beautiful vocalise imitation on the piano. He loves producing these sequences. And you think, oh, it's banal, oh, it sounds like a pop song. It does, but at the same time with the thrill, oh, that's a good one. The trill it gives that sense of vibrato to the melodic line of the top. Chopin knows how to do all these devices of expression becoming meaningful. Not just vain decorations, not just beautifications, also, but not only. And if you take it for what it is, the meaning that you find that comes in the rhetoric, in the semantics, in the meaning of the words, in the sense of why you use this syllable and not another one, because all of a sudden the harmonization changes, the sequence changes from major to minor, and you go through different soundscapes, landscapes, expressions of emotional expression of heights, the major of C, to the diminished of the B, minor of A, and the dominant. How do you explain that? You can't, Frédéric. Tell them. I don't know how to tell them. It's only one grace note. Who the hell will allow me to do more? That, right? Nobody should allow me, and I shouldn't allow it to myself. Who am I? Nothing. Who's Chopin? Everything. Mademoiselle Boulanger used to tell me in situations like this, if you don't like what he wrote, write your own. But if you play his, play it fully like it is. I didn't shy to write my own. Me feeling like I want to express more the meaning of each dropping of the step through the harmonic progression, and then the trill, and then the vibrato, and the dropping and the decay, and the sense of a wounded hero dropping from the hope to the less and to the acceptance. All these things are there inside that. And if they're too much, then perhaps then we lose the direction of the line, the horizon line direction that we should follow for, and therefore have these sentences that are beautifully decorated only for the purpose of it, not for the decorations themselves. The modulations or the harmonizations do it. I don't need to add to it a vibrato, a rubato, a delayed repeated note. So at which point do I express myself, hold back from expressing myself in the piece for what it means, and in which do I overindulge expressing myself too much within the limits of what is given, and I find I need to do more. So who am I to need more? Once you're in this endless metronomic ping pong between too much, not enough, my feelings and his writing, my feelings, my expression through his writing is all, and my feelings should enter in it. I should make sense of it through his writing, and I shouldn't need to add more things in order to express it, because the purity of the line, the direction of the line, the semantics, the very meaning of what I'm saying. I think that if you don't go through this inner Sehnsucht, inner search, inner world of yes, it's like a conductor in an orchestra. A conductor pulls the beat, the orchestra plays the beat. So there is some sort of a tension and a release between the two, and you create in that space of the beat this energy. And this energy gives the sense of tension and release, not only the harmony, it's also the pulse, the beat, the phrasing. It's all the elements of the music. It's not just the words, it's also the intonation of the word, and then there's a delay of the word. I think one shouldn't spare oneself going through these dilemmas, because they really are dilemmas. Okay, they appear superfluous to anybody from outside, saying, so what? Just play like you feel it anyway, everybody else plays it, and fine. I mean, you're making too much out of every detail. Perhaps I do. Perhaps it means so much to me that I am too much into the detail. I have to see the micro and the macro. I have to see the meaningful, long breadth of vision of the piece, and not just every expression of every detail through each harmonization or decoration or melodic effect. I believe that inside oneself, one tells oneself not too much, and one does because one cannot not. And when you cannot not, you do just enough. But you still stay on the tracks. You don't just zigzag and say, oh, a little of this, oh, too much of that, oh, not enough of this. Of course, then the sense of what we call rubato, the stealing of time, will become unvirtuous. You don't return what you stole. So you're still there, and you feel like tipsy walking around the place. Instead of having this loose flowing way of going through things without to just be marching on the beat, like as if it's a march, metronomically only, but the pulse of the tension and the release, the pulse of the rhythm, the pulse of the melodic line, the impulse of the expression, all these things are part of the way you walk through the section, the allure that you give yourself, the track that you are on. It's the integrity and the taste, the emotion and the intensity, all in one. At some point, you find that osmosis. Perhaps not right away, perhaps never. Perhaps it escapes you because for technical reasons or musical reasons or influences, you have, oh God, I played for so long time Chopin this way. Thank God now I'm out of this phase. I'm going to try to find it through the other way, to enter in the same piece with another point of view and find perhaps the truth that I was seeking for in my earlier age. But you have to start somewhere. You have to contradict yourself. You have to accept the contradiction and try to find in the performance an answer that is partly more intuitive than intellectual in the moment, on the spur of the second, in the unexpected of the on the moment. Something happens that you didn't control, and then all of a sudden you make sense of it and you think, perhaps that gives me a clue to how to make that bridge to go to there. I know it's overly passionately speaking about technique and practicing and repetitivity, and I understand that practicing for a pianist is a lonely thing, unlike a quartetist that works with the other musicians in the string instrument to merge together, to blend together, to organize together, so they really progress in the group together. Here you practice alone, and you have to find motivation. Is it the melodic, the harmonic, whatever it is, but at repetitivity alone in the practice room, you lose that. And then finally comes the moment you perform it, or you try it, or you test it with the second piano, or if you have an orchestra, chance to have a rehearsal with, and you try to enter in the piece for what it's supposed to mean. Not only in the recordings you hear passively because you don't play in the recordings, but when you start playing it, you start hearing the balances, you hear the organizations of the different spacing between the orchestration and the way it is, and the way it sounds to you on stage versus what it sounds in the audience, or perhaps the microphones who record the combination. So you end up by hearing it a little bit skewed, but with more things that you didn't hear before. So you're the actor of the play, not just the spectator. And at the same time, you are a spectator because you try to match it to what you liked hearing from others playing it. And so in your inner ear, you try to match the imagination that you have for the piece with the piece itself. This is a fascinating self-search or self-escaping, and trying to catch and fetch and organize and capture and then define and then lock in and then secure and then repeat until it becomes reliably every time, so morning, evening, anytime, and so that you don't get to be too dependable of the different types of articulation or actions of pianos. If it's all about reliability, then you don't go into the subtlety. If it's all about subtlety, then you might feel like you take too much risk, and therefore you will never be appearing to be controlling your technique. So you have to find... you have to be focused on short-term organization of practicing, where you always search for a short-term solution. This note, that half note, this whole note to be, this note to be not too loud, this shifting, and you go through it, but you repeat until you find it, but you keep concentrated on it. The problem is that most of the students, when they start repeating a section more than 2 or 3 or 4 times, they lose the connection with it. They disconnect, their brain goes off because it's repetitive, it's boring, and it is, besides being lonely. And so it's not like something where you're enticed by the others in the quartet to contribute to it. You contribute to your inner world, but your inner world sort of like fades away when you have to just organize. So you avoid playing. Of course, then at that point, the cautiousness overtakes the expression of the intuition. Oh, I'm gonna just measure it exactly. I like to say shift, touch, prepare in order to be secure and reliable. But if you do too much of that, then you delay too much. It is no more intuitive. It doesn't sound to the listener, regardless if they're connoisseurs or professionals, that you have that freedom to just say that gesture without and you can say, okay, just only one note, it doesn't matter, it's true, it's better than to miss it, because then it's so evident that you messed up that you feel incredibly as a performer incredibly uncomfortable in front of everybody, saying, oh my god, I messed up, and so it destroys even the phrasing that you're gonna do after, because you feel embarrassed basically about it, and it's so silly, but it is true, and it has to be taken into account. We expose our psyche when we play. We expose our expression of most intimate feelings, even if we play it for people in great numbers we don't know, and we have to say something intimate. Deal with the lengths and the shortness of the delays and the decays, and the way we deal with the pace of the flow of the left hand, and the way we manage with the pedal of the right foot, the enhancement, slight enhancement of the resonance of the long sounds of the aria. But they say something so intimate, so pristine, something you say only in intimacy to somebody who you're trusting. You won't go in front of people and say something intimate, because it's intimate, and intimate means earnest and honest, and sometimes afraid of being silly or seeing or perhaps goofy. I mean, that's life, goofy. And I find that when an artist is so dressed in the technique, then all that disappears and they just play notes. Well groomed and organized in order to be effective and performed every time on any piano all the time, regardless of the direction of the line or not. And you cannot blame that as a teacher. You have to encourage that, because this meticulousness brings you to play clean, and if you play clean you can get more self-confidence. When you get self-confidence that you're reliable every time and never going, then that little detail might not be by itself defining in the interpretation, but it gives you enough the confidence so you can go forward and dare. And dare, because you practiced, and you practice to be daring, not to practice to be cautious. You're cautious in practicing to be daring in the performance, because at some point you have to take it in your hands and say, I want to say that, and I'm going to practice until I can say it reliably, but not hold and shy and hold back in order to be just correct. In that sense of correct is perhaps not the right word, but to be right, to be not wrong, to not be exposing myself to a stupid mistake which makes me ashamed, basically, because the others don't make it. It's always somebody who plays cleaner than me. It's always there, and it's always about the competition. And the competition itself, in itself is very important because it gives you the incentive to practice more, to do better, and not discourage you in a sense that is good. But if it becomes the only trigger, then the musical aspect of it should not be disconnected and say, I'm going to study the music, then I'm going to add the technique, and then I'm going to add the pedals, then the memorization, then perhaps the rubato. And you think, or one sometimes thinks, some people think like that, by layers. And I don't think it works that way. I think you have to incorporate all the elements in each section, the technique, the expression, the delay, the expression of the meaning of the line, with the exact technical weight of the hand and the transmission of the weight between the knuckles and the fingertips touching inside the keys if it's legato, or articulate above if it's air legato, or spiccato, I was going to say, spoken legato, or legato, or sung. Yes, you can monitor these things in practicing every detail until you reach it in short term in your practicing, and then you lock it in your muscular memory. And then when you play on a different piano, you manage it, perhaps not as well as you wished, but you manage it, you feel confident, and you say, okay, nothing can go wrong, I can go forward. It's not like driving bumper cars and hoping not to hit one, because the purpose of it is to be hit and to think it's fun. Or hit somebody and still for fun, but you don't do that when you drive. You try to avoid cars, even if you have insurance, obviously. So I want to teach students, as I do, and teachers do in general, is to give them the confidence to play clean. And through playing clean, they gain confidence, and then they do what with that? They should do to state their musical conviction, and not just stay at the level of I found out how to control to play it clean, because this way I'm reliable. It's a disservice to the student to let them play risky. It's a disservice to the student to let them play only confident. You have to give them a sense of confidence that gives them a calculated risk-taking through holding a thumb before you reach a fifth on the octaves with voices. Thumb more than fifth in order to balance the two hands, because today's cross-strung pianos resonate in sympathy together and give the resonance of the whole structure rather than just by ranges like in Chopin's time. So you have to take into account all these intellectual facts, but at the moment of playing, it should be just, well, ideally that. But I think that ultimately what a student, an artist, an old man, woman, artist, or just teacher, not artist teacher who plays, or teacher who doesn't play, or teacher who also plays, it's not necessarily both the same, because there's the pedagogical aspect and the artistic aspect and the performing aspect that calls for certain ways, right? It brings us to be very humble, because we want to help ourselves or the others when we teach, because it's a great giving, self-giving. And it has to be always one-to-one, tailor matched to the specifics of the hand or the expression or the way of musicianship or understanding of the music, the aesthetics and the stylistic truth that the student has intuitively or gets from you as a teacher, or perhaps from another place, regardless where. The students are by essence the artists who shape their beliefs or their convictions by, in a way, fighting your own as a teacher, because they don't have to. If they absorb everything you give them, it's no more a student, it becomes a clone. And what you respect in a teacher, in a student, is the fact that they come with something that means to them, and you don't want to destroy that flame that is fragile, that is vulnerable, but that is strongly vulnerable. because it guides them through to go through endless hours of practice, endless competitions that they don't win, or if they do, endless relentlessness. Like, I'm going to try it, I'm going to get it, because this is the first ballad, this is the first concerto, this is the first scherzo, whatever it is, the piece that means to you, Rachmaninoff concerto, or the sonata, or the whatever, it's the beloved piece, the Liszt sonata, all these pieces that are iconic, that you heard, you dreamt to play because you like them, played by I don't know who, and then all of a sudden it's your turn, that you reach the technique to perhaps be able to, and once you start entering in the details of it, you realize, oh my god, I'm gonna get lost in all this sea of details. How will I put all this together and not forget everything in every bar? There's so many things to control, organize, and put together in the muscular memory, and the pedal, and the hearing, and adapting to the acoustics and the piano and the articulation, especially the action, repeated notes, notes close up. So will I play still subtle, or just reactive to play precise? Matter of fact or intense? Or innuendo? And not. The difference might not be great and big and obvious, especially in a hall with a beautiful piano. Practice rooms pianos don't sound the same as, or home pianos don't sound the same as the recordings with acoustics, and then sometimes they add electronically more stuff to make the sound even more appealing, and you hear like, wow, I like to play like this, and you hear when you play yourself the piece, it doesn't, you feel like you're playing the piece, but it doesn't sound like the piece you hear when you like it, or you liked it before you start playing it. So you have to find a way to help the student reach and match their inner hearing with the piece and what you bring them from your understanding, and very carefully guide them so they express themselves with certain level of comfort is too much, but let's say of a hope, a certain self-esteem that they can go through it no matter what, and then they can add to it the expression that they want to speak through with their own life, language, experience, birth. It's all about that ultimately. We express ourselves through the notes of the great composers with our life path of expressions that match these emotions, and how much we overstate it, or we understate it, or we hold back, or we hover and we overexpress with more hair, makeup on the face. I think at some point you should allow to test it, and only you yourself, student or professional, or meaning with experience, you will say to yourself one day, no, I shouldn't do that. If you're told this by somebody you trust, you might say, no, I like it this way. Fine, you have to define yourself against something. That's fine. That's, I think, why one-to-one lessons are very important, because they bring this kind of lab work where you test, you and the teacher should give you the guidelines, but not the, gives you the how to build your lock, but doesn't give you the key to the lock. You have to shape your key for the lock of that interpretation, and then you open this and you go, oh, this is what it is. Of course you're bothered by the piano. I wish it was this, I wish it was sounding like this, I wish the action was that. And besides blaming the instrument, which is healthy, you try to find ways to play subtly without to take risks to have a hole. And you measure it by trying. But I liked it so much. Watch the conductor. Voice your thirds. Sometimes you have to allow yourself to play your heart out. No harm. Nobody died. I might have not won the competition, but I wasn't competing. Thank you.